Hi students, welcome to Year 11 Biology and Module 2, Organisation of Living Things. This is video number 18 and we're going to focus a little bit more on the blood. In fact, specifically what we're going to do is to investigate transport systems in animals and plants by comparing structures and components using physical and digital models, including, but not limited to, microscopic samples of blood. So really, this is primarily about blood, and one of the important things that students need to be able to do is to have a look at blood slides. So you can do this one of two ways. If you've got access to blood smears that are pre-prepared, you can't prepare your own. Unfortunately, we can't do that in schools anymore, but we do have a lot of prepared blood slides. Sometimes you might be able to contrast normal blood with blood from, say, someone who has had a recent infection, and you can notice some of the differences in the relative amounts of some of these important components. But when we're looking at blood, what we're trying to do is identify some of the main things that we can see. And we know that the blood is red, and primarily that's a result of these red blood cells. They dominate. Erythrocytes is the correct term, I guess, or more correct term than red blood cells. And these are the only cells in our body that don't have a nucleus. What they do have is lots and lots of hemoglobin. And so what we want is for that hemoglobin to pick up the oxygen that is being exchanged across the gas exchange surfaces in the lungs, across the alveoli, into the capillaries, the blood capillaries, and to form oxyhemoglobin. In lower concentrations of oxygen, that oxygen can be released from the cell and therefore it will diffuse into body cells such as muscle cells that are needing oxygen for respiration. In smaller amounts, but no less important in the blood, is the white blood cells. These are the leukocytes. There are a number of different types, and we might talk about some of those, particularly when we're looking at the immune response. So specifically things like the lymphocytes, the B cells and the T cells. Macrophages, a group of cells that are phagocytic, that basically go around and clean up a lot of the non-self material. So those sorts of cells are important in the fight against disease. About 700 red blood cells for every white blood cell is what we would expect in a normal, healthy human. And of course, if you do have an infection, then the number of white blood cells is going to rise. So that ratio is going to be out. And often you can see that just by looking through the microscope at a blood slide to get an idea of the relative amounts. Now, under the microscope, the rest of these can be a little bit harder to see. Platelets are small when you're trying to look at them under a microscope. They're little particles, fragments of cells. They have a very important role in blood clotting. They can be a little bit tricky to resolve with a lot of the school light microscopes. Plasma is the liquid part of the blood. It's basically 90% water, and it's allowing the transport of these more solid cells around the body. So we need to have a fluid really through which each of these different particles can move, and so that's what the plasma provides. There's a lot of different dissolved compounds that are also present, including some of those important gases that we've been talking about, carbon dioxide and oxygen. And while a lot of oxygen will be picked up by the hemoglobin in the red blood cells or the erythrocytes, there is also going to be a small amount of that, as well as amino acids, sugars, mineral ions, and all sorts of different things, and a few waste products that are going to need to be filtered out from the body at some later point. We've also put hormones in there, and they're a group of chemicals that again are transported around the body, and they usually have a specific effect on certain target cells. I've put fibrin in here as well, which is a plasma protein that links together to form networks, and that's what we see when the blood is clotting, so that reduces our chances of severe blood loss. Obviously, if you cut yourself in a fairly significant place, that sort of response is not necessarily going to stop the blood straight away, but usually for small minor cuts, very, very efficient system in sealing off those capillaries and reducing the amount of blood loss that you have. So just a bit of an overview then of the main composition of the blood. And again, these are things that we want to have a look at under a microscope. So take this information and take it with you when you're looking at blood under a microscope. A large proportion of what you are seeing will be red blood cells. They make up about 41%, and they're mostly what you can see when you look down there. And they do look like little red discs or donuts that haven't quite had the hole cut out properly. And they're just little bags of hemoglobin that are transporting oxygen around the body. Only a small percentage of the composition of blood is white blood cells. And of course, that does change a little bit during certain times where we've had certain types of infections, and that includes the platelets that are sort of moving around to clot the blood when there's damage that's caused. And then most of the rest is plasma. So more than half of the composition of blood is plasma, and that's that liquid component that contains all those other goodies. One of the important things when people are donating blood is that obviously a full blood transfusion is going to use that blood, but a lot of the time the blood's going to be separated into different components and therefore can often have a benefit for not just one person, but maybe multiple people from the one blood donation, as different things, different components of the blood can be used for different reasons. So important is this that we've actually got a little bit of technology into looking at artificial ways that we can recreate some of the components of blood in order to treat things like severe burns. Thanks for watching.